if you can't afford raw and I'm telling you not to feed kibble, just make your own. Well, that throws a lot of people into a tizzy because they, and I think the veterinary profession has done people a tremendous disservice here, and probably they did that disservice because the pet food industry told them to. But they've essentially said every mouthful must be 100% balanced and don't change the diet one iota. And people do change the diet and their dog gets sick and they go, my God, my veterinarian's right. And so people get in their heads about, I don't dare make my own food for my dog because I can't be sure it's going to be balanced. Meanwhile, they're feeding themselves and they're not eating Purina human chow. So it just tells you the tremendous amount of faith that the public has in veterinarians, and it's probably should be scaled back just a little bit. I mean, if that's not inappropriate for me to say. So let me get back to you. You know,
No,
I just want.
we're preaching from the same hymn book, Steve. We're
Well,
preaching. We're singing
let
from
me
the
just
same
sing
in the
your
same
other hymn
choir.
for you, which was, if you're right, it's tremendously complex. They once asked, I don't know if you've heard of T. Colin Campbell, the fellow who did that huge epidemiological study in China, was it called the China Project or whatever, and they were looking at that real food, plant-based diet and the medical benefits it was having. And he tried to sit down and suss out all the different mechanisms. And after about a decade of that, he basically just threw his hands up in the air and said, you know what, there's a million and one reasons why it works. And there's no one of them that's particularly important. And I give up. So, and I think that's okay because, or shall I say, only if you're giving whole things, as whole as you can. Because, for example, I was at another conference, and one of my first holistic conferences, and a fella, you ever seen the kids' toy Spirograph? Do you remember when you were a kid, you could draw all these crazy diagrams just with wheels rotating against each other? You get all these stylized drawings. He threw up like this stylized spirograph type diagram, and he said, so this is why I don't supplement. And it's because this is related to that, is related to this, is related to that, is related to this, related to that. And it's just a rat's nest, and it's beyond me. So, and then everyone goes, okay, I totally agree with you. And so people abandon the notion of supplementation. Whereas I looked at that and I thought, all right, so what you're asking for is an idealized balance of nutrients. Where are you going to find that? You find it in another living organism. If you look at the balance of nutrients in, say, broccoli, you'll find it's very similar to the balance of nutrients inside a human body. In other words, there's a certain amount of there's shared evolution here going back hundreds of millions of years, yes, but shared evolution. And so we all are operating by the same mechanisms. And that's why humans can make great use of whole plant material, and dogs can make great use of whole prey. And when they eat a whole thing, they're getting everything they need in perfect ratios. So if we just extend that to the person struggling in their kitchen and is worried about, not having nutritional balance, it's like use whole ingredients and change them up. And if they say, well, I can't change them up because they'll get sick. I've seen what my dog does when I change the diet. Yeah, if you change kibble, which races through the system and basically feeds bad guy bacteria as much as it feeds anything else, absolutely, they're going to get sick. But whole food goes through this slowly. And if you change it, you get a different basket of nutrients. And so if we start to look at a body as an ecosystem, and when you take a meal and you pick of whole foods, you're putting little ecosystems inside a bigger ecosystem. And if you take a product like Gussy's Gut, which is basically, I have an ecosystem, I have my bacteria and I have the food that it grew on, and I freeze dry it. That's another whole complex ecosystem that's going into that body. You're just going to make better use of it. But as soon as you're starting to kind of dissect things out and manufacture something in a lab and dump it in the system and expect good things to happen, they don't, because then the spirograph wheel becomes operative.
Could I throw in another layer on top of that, Steve? Yes. And the most important word for everybody out there here is homeostasis. And the point I make is this: that over evolutionary time, that's exactly what bodies have done. They've worked with real foods. They haven't worked with this concocted, heat-generated, full of carbohydrate foods that is not biologically appropriate for a dog who has never eaten that way before, so his genes aren't adapted to it. But in the homeostatic situation, no meal that a dog over millions of years has ever been complete and balanced. Balance is achieved over time in the evolutionary sense. And the other thing that goes on is this: because it's working with real foods, it will extract, if there's just a small amount of what it needs in that particular food, it will extract everything that it needs from it of that small amount. But if there is too much of something, if it's real food, it can discard. The body discards by a process of homeostasis that we don't understand what it doesn't need. And this is what we see, for example, in the poo, the easiest word for feces, droppings, fumates, as King Pellinor used to say, but that's another whole story of King Arthur and all that. But in the poo in the backyard, it goes white. Why does it go white? Because the dog has discarded the calcium from the bone that it didn't need. It's homeostasis at work, and it's wonderful because we can depend on that by feeding real food, balance it over time. The dog's body will take it out, and I even have the belief, in the same way that fasting is beneficial to us, that having each meal complete and balanced may not be beneficial to us because we didn't evolve that way. So I take this really simplistic view. I look at the science that says this, that, and the other, and I look at it, is this backing up evolution? And, I always find it does. And
Well,
I believe what
how
you're
could we
talking
have
about.
dogs today if the only way they could have gotten here was by eating a complete and balanced meal every day? It never would have happened. Humans would never, nothing would have made it on Earth. There must be a system,
That's right.
where you could eat something one day and it's too much of it, but then you don't have it 3 days later, and yet still you can somehow draw on it. And veterinarians, at least, and granted, I've been a vet a long time now, but when I was taught in school, it was okay. Well, B vitamins, you just pee them out, you never store them, so you're always going to need to take your B vitamins. Protein, there's no storage pool for protein, so you need to always have protein. And they had this this notion that certain things were stored but certain things weren't, and so they always had to have them, otherwise the system falls apart. Whereas of course we have amino acid storage pools. It's called muscle, and we're constantly catabolizing, just kind of building muscle, taking it apart, building it muscle, taking it apart. And B vitamins, we do store B vitamins. It takes years, for example, for somebody who goes into veganism and then doesn't supplement themselves with B12. It often takes years before they run out of B12 because we do store B vitamins in our liver. So we're dealing, the pet food industry, I find, is based on very outdated concepts that it's disturbing to me that those concepts really have not changed in the past 40 years or so. And because our understanding of nutrition, our understanding of physiology, of pathophysiology, it's radically different than it was 40 years ago. But our tools, kibble, steroids and immune suppressive drugs, non-steroidals and antibiotics, same stuff. It's disturbing. It's been decades and nobody's doing anything different. You want something different, you need to go to the plant realm, and you need to go to real foods And then you have your pick suddenly of all these physiological effects that you can achieve. It's fantastic.